All right. Get ready for a great show.
Black space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
Hello, I'm George Middleton, your host this evening on this podcast episode of Black Space Live. The topic for our discussion today, we are going to examine the question, has feminism been... Okay, that was an omen. We're going to examine the question, has feminism been a net positive for the Black community? However, before we get started, I would like to briefly take this time to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. In other words, don't be selfish with this content. Share the love. You can catch Black Space live on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Spotify. And you can catch us on Anchor FM, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeart Radio. Now, let's introduce the panelists who need no introduction, beginning with Zuri. Say hi to the people out there and let them know anything you think they need to know today.
Peace, Black Space. I'm Zuri. Like you said, probably don't need an introduction. I've been on here a while now, so
everybody know you. Welcome, Zuri. Doc Locks.
No, I don't talk about it. I'm Doc Locks. Nice to see y'all again.
And you don't talk about it, you be about it. Welcome back, Doc Locks. The Big Mojo.
Good evening.
The strong, quiet, silent type.
Sometimes.
Till you get him going, because he's a walking library, walking historical library. All right, so I want to begin this with a monologue of sorts. And I have to say that I did not write this one, but I think it's very appropriate to set the context of this discussion on the analysis of feminism as it pertains to the African American community. Some critics argue that the feminist movement, especially in its early stages, primarily catered to middle-class white women and often neglected the specific needs and issues faced by women of color, including Black women. This criticism led to the development of intersectional feminism, which acknowledges and addresses the unique challenges faced by women of color who often deal with both sexism and racism. In relation to the Black community, some people argue that certain aspects of mainstream feminism may have negative impacts. Here are a couple of potential issues. 1, erosion of family structure. Some critics argue that the emphasis on individual empowerment and independence promoted by some feminists may have contributed to an erosion of traditional family structures in the Black community, with potential negative societal impacts such as single parenthood, child poverty, and crime. However, it's essential to note that these issues are multifaceted and can be solely attributed to the influence, and can't be solely attributed to the influence of feminism. 2, neglect of Black men's issues. Some contend that the focus on women's rights and equality can sometimes overshadow the unique struggles faced by Black men, such as racial profiling, high incarceration rates, and limited access to education and economic opportunities. This critique suggests that an exclusive focus on feminism can potentially lead to a lack of attention to these critical issues. It's also important to note the many positive impacts that feminism has had on the Black community. The feminist movement has fought for and achieved significant strides in equality, such as better access to education and jobs, reproductive rights, and legal protections against discrimination and violence. Black feminists in particular have pushed for a more inclusive and intersectional feminism that recognizes and addresses the unique challenges faced by Black women. This has led to increased representation and visibility for Black women in various fields, as well as policies and initiatives that aim to address the specific forms of discrimination they face. The negative impacts listed above don't represent the views of all Black people or all feminists. They are criticisms that have been raised, and they highlight the importance of an inclusive and intersectional approach to feminism that considers the diverse experiences and needs of all women. So I think that is a very all-inclusive summation of the existence, the creation, the implementation, existence, and implementation of this concept of feminism. So, Doc Locks, what thoughts does that summary dwell up in you? What do you resonate with? What do you disagree with? What do you dismiss?
Well, I agree with a lot of it. I don't think I can dismiss any of it, or we should dismiss any of it. I think we first have to understand what feminism is and how it's being defined in this segment and in our conversation. But I don't agree with it necessarily being the cause of absentee fathers or single mothers or single parenting. I think there are other factors that lead to that more so than an ideology. I do think that feminism has had its place for all women, like giving us the right to vote, eventually giving us full rights to our bodies, only to be snatched back. When we talk about rights and we think about women, it wasn't until 1972, 73 that women had all or full rights, right? Like some women, when we talk about our grandparents, could not or were not supposed to have checking accounts. They could not sign leases. They could not buy their own houses, or if they did, it had to be an underhanded deal. So the push for women's rights or being a feminist has had its pros for all of us. But with most things in America, it started for the benefit of one of us, not all of us. We just happen to benefit a little bit.
The African females, what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think because we are taught to do much with little, we are able to have made the strides that we've made. But we still have a long way to go.
Okay. And just to be clear, you don't believe that feminism in any way is related or a potential causal point to the erosion of family structure?
Not the feminism that I understand or the definition that I'm working with, no. Now, if you want to talk about how people are taught and how mothers prepare daughters for certain things, then maybe that does. But I don't know if that's feminist theory.
Got you. Okay, we'll dig into that a little further. Zuri, what's your take? How does this hit you?
I was just gonna agree with Doc Locke said. It depends on which one you're talking about, but I guess the feminism that I'm thinking of is totally different from the one that she's thinking of. So the one that I'm thinking of, I don't think it's had a positive effect on the Black community,
Tell us how.
because a lot of women feel like they don't need men anymore to do anything. And I understand, like, yes, we got our rights, but I think now it's gotten a little bit way out of hand than what it should be. You know, like you said, we don't have family structure anymore. We're not creating generational wealth. The children are grown up being misled. We're having bad examples of dysfunctional families. So I say it depends, like you said, once we dig into what kind of feminism, but the one that I'm thinking of, I don't think it's had a positive effect. Some ways, but not in majority ways. I feel like it's had more of cons versus pros for the Black community.
So
So
instead
I
of a net
think,
positive, a net negative.
Yes, it's a
mhm.
negative. It
So
doesn't
I
say.
think go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. It depends. Like when you said when George goes into what feminism that we're talking about tonight.
So I think what you're describing is the what I said, the last aspect of this is how people are taught. And I don't know if that's feminist theory. So if I had a mother or grandmother who told me to be independent, don't depend on a man, always have your own, and instilled that in me in a negative way, I don't know if that's feminist energy, right? I don't know. And I'm coming from a theory aspect, not from um, like this is just how people are raised aspect. You understand what I'm saying? Because I think anything can be toxic,
Yeah.
and I think that is like
I
I
don't.
did a podcast on toxic femininity, and I think that's what that is. But that's
Yeah, and
not feminist theory.
like I agree with what you said. It's not raised, but now it's like a societal whole. That's what's been taught in general in the music and everything that we see. So you don't even have to be taught that by your parents. You can be taught something totally different from your parents. But once you get out on your own, and the things you listen to and the things you watch and the environment that you're in plays an effect in it as well. So and
But
I think
isn't
that's
that
teaching all the young girls that today at a young age, and even women in their 20s, 30s, when you listen to rap music, all things like that.
How did if Doc Locks, if you're saying that uh, it depends on what's being taught,
mhm,
that might not be the feminist
mhm,
concept that you're speaking of. Let me ask you this
mhm,
question:
mhm.
How did this particular brand get associated with feminism then?
I don't know, to be honest. I can only speculate. Um, People, the mother, white, black, Asian, whatever, if anything goes left in the family, people get great joy in blaming the mother or blaming something that they are not familiar with, right? So that's what I think that's part of it. And then when it's perpetuated, like Zuri said, in music, and we haven't taught our children that we listen to music, we don't live it, right? We dance to it. It's entertainment. It's not something we go out and try to live or create for ourselves. Then there's a breakdown. But I don't know that that breakdown is directly a direct correlation of me wanting to have the same pay as a man who has the same education and the same years of experience that I have, or my ability to vote. You
Let me ask this:
Mhm.
does feminism compel women to take on more masculine energies in order to achieve the independence that feminism is looking for?
I think so. And then
Elaborate.
I think it does cause women to take on more masculine, because if you want to be equal to a man, you have to kind of show him like, hey, I can do the same things that you can do, but in reality, you can't. Like I was discussing with some people earlier today that say that the men's just stopped working overall, the economy would crash. If the power went out, who do we call? We don't call women, we call men. Who built the foundation of what we're on today? Men. Like when I say the foundation, like, you know, the streets, buildings, all of those things, electrical. Some women may think that they can do it, but our bodies aren't meant to do that. Like, okay, say you want to do roofing. You can maybe go out there as a woman, maybe 1 or 2 hours, but that man can stay out there and work hard all day long and get the job done, and we can't. There's like, there's different roles that we were meant to have here. The man, woman. So we all are here for different roles.
You know, I'm working on
Still,
I'm working on a new book, and it's titled Men Formation. And you just hit on something that is going to be one of the questions that I propose in the book, which is what historically or currently, what nation exists that has been created by women? What nation or country exists in history, past, present, that
So
has
a
been
lot of
created?
them in Africa.
that's what I was going to say. It's one country in Africa where I know it's all women, but they don't do super hard labor.
There is a particular culture that
Yeah, it's a
is
culture.
matriarchally led, but did they build the
No.
nation? That's, and I'm not saying they did it or not. I'm just wanting to know what particular country, right? A geographical area that houses this culture where it creates its own government and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
What particular country, historically speaking, has been created and governed completely by women?
Must not be enough because we can't think of the answer.
Well, or we haven't been taught. You know, there's a lot of things that occurred that have been kept from us, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. But
Okay, we'll keep exploring that question. Maybe there's a listener that might have that answer for us. So it I asked the question: is it possible that feminism compels women to take on masculine energy? Doc Locks, where are you on that?
I think so. You know, Booker T talks about the double consciousness of Black people in America, right? When we start breaking it down to gender roles, I think women have multiple consciousness. So if I am on a roof all day, then I might be operating in masculine energy, or even if I'm a CEO, or whatever, a teacher, a leadership role, I might be operating in masculine energy. But again, it goes back to how we're taught and what we set up in our homes. But if I come home to a husband or a family, whatever that family looks like, then I can transition into a more feminine role or aspect of myself. I don't think we're all just one thing. And throughout our experiences in the day, we put on and take off certain personas. So I think that's the same with this.
I I agree with that because everybody has masculine and feminine, but
Mm-hmm.
some women wear that masculine hat way more than they do the other hat. And sometimes masculine doesn't have to be, oh, I'm gonna, you know, He-Man or whatever. Sometimes masculine, sometimes as a woman, you may do have to put on a masculine role, but some of some women, they wear it all the time. And another thing that I like to say, yes, men have it, but you don't hear men say that I'm going to turn on my masculine for a woman. They're masculine all the time. Or, when women say, I want to rest in my femininity until this masculine man comes along, you're supposed to be naturally feminine anyway. But you just have to create that balance. And a lot of women aren't creating that balance.
I was watching a recent interview with Dr. Iyanla Van Zant, and I like her nuanced approach to addressing the difference between masculine energy and feminine energy. And she says, she notes that both are powerful. Masculine energy is powerful. Feminine energy is powerful.
Very.
However, she sums up today's average woman today as a man in a skirt.
I agree.
And
But I think
isn't
that's because
it isn't
they haven't
about
been taught.
it isn't about necessarily the job or activity that they're doing.
It's the energy.
It's the energy.
And the attitude.
Well, that's the attitude will reflect the energy. So it's and I love how Dr. Van Zandt really described this, that today's woman is not authentically in touch with the true power of her femininity. That today's woman believes that there's a difference in being powerful and operating in your power. And she describes the average woman, not all, but the average woman, as striving to be powerful instead of operating in her power. Huge difference if you think about that.
Very huge difference.
And it does. I think what you're saying, Doc Locks, is a key point here, that they haven't been taught, and especially as it pertains to the African community in America. The family structure has been eroded. Now we're trying to decide if feminism played a part in that or not. But regardless of the fact, the family structure is in continual state of erosion. So young males are not being taught what they need to know, and young females aren't being taught what they need to know.
Yes. And a lot of young men are growing up with feminine energy, and not because they're not raised around masculine men. A lot of them are very argumentative, don't know how to solve their problems, because a lot of them are around their moms, are very emotional.
80% of African American families are single mother household led. I had an old pastor say to me one time, the best description for a young African boy's developmental experience is, I grew up to be a man just like my mama.
Yeah, seeing their mom handle everything, and then they expect the women that they date to be the same way when it's been dysfunctional from the jump. And then sometimes the mom doesn't explain to them why they are the way that they are, because then that sometimes leads to them taking accountability for the actions to where they are and the choices they made to where they are today.
Dr. Mojo, he's back. He went through a energy. We're talking about masculine and feminine energies. Dr. Mojo went through an energy crisis of a different sort. What happened to you, Mojo?
Ron DeSantis.
All my power went out. I can barely hear now with the volume all the way up.
Wow. We hear you fine. Were you able to listen to any of the discussion, or was you're just coming in cold?
Let me see.
All right, you keep working on. Will you keep working on? We'll keep you tied in. All right. So, yeah, to get back to Doc Locke's assertion that women haven't been taught. So, Doc Locke, what's the solution to that? If women haven't been taught to operate and command the complete power and capitalize on the power of the feminine creature. What's the solution to that? And is feminism the route in order to get there?
I think women have to rally around women. Healthy women have to rally around women. Like Zuri and I might not agree on what feminism is or how it manifests and all of that, but that doesn't stop us or shouldn't stop us from working together to create healthy young women and teaching them right from wrong and how to handle certain situations with grace, if you will.
But where do today's women go to get the actual knowledge of
Mhm.
the feminine
It's supposed to be
mystique?
taught, like from our parents, our grandparents, our aunts. We're always talking about auntie this and auntie that. But if all auntie is doing is sitting around sipping her wine, talking to her girlfriends, then that's not really teaching us anything. But I remember growing up, and my grandmother taught me how to clean baseboards. For the life of me, I don't know why that's feminine, but I know how to do it. I also know how to cook, right? And I also know how to drive. So I think having those sister circles and those moments where the elders command the room and say, no, you're going to sit down, you're going to hush, and you're going to listen because of whatever the circumstance is. I've already been through it and I made it without all of the anguish that you're encountering. I don't think we talk a lot. Now, I'm a single parent of a boy. And I remember when I had to move to another state. And I remember instead of being welcomed by women who were married and had boys, I was outcast because they were afraid, unsure about their families, right? So they didn't want the single friend coming over to the cookout getting the attention or whatever, So I think we have to kind of put insecurities aside and start to pour into our youth.
Okay. Before we go to you on this, Zuri, I want Mojo. Are you able to hear us effectively?
It's really faint, but I can hear you.
All right. I want to go back and let's see if we can pull you in on the early part of the discussion. We were talking about some of the potential concerns of feminism, and I'll briefly do a Reader's Digest description on the two. There were two potential issues. There's actually more than two, but in this monologue that I read earlier, there are two potential concerns as it pertains to mainstream feminism. One, the erosion of the family structure. Critics argue that the emphasis on individual empowerment and independence promoted by some feminists may have contributed to an erosion of the traditional family structures in the Black community. The second is neglect of Black men's issues. Some contend that the focus on women's rights and equality can sometimes overshadow the unique struggles faced by Black men, such as racial profiling, high incarceration rates, and limited access to education and economic opportunities. Doc Locke's asserts that she doubts that feminism in and of itself contributed to any of those concerns. Zuri does seem to see a connection on some level to it. Where do you stand on this from your historical perspective?
Well, I'm the second one is just another point. You can't blend everybody into every movement. So I don't think that's a moot point anyway. But the first part, I agree to an extent, and really is only a small component, because I've been saying for years that individualism has been toxic to male and female relationships in general, not just marriage, but just period. Because if you cannot be self-sufficient and selfish and then be a functional part of a couple and cooperate at the same time. And to some extent, the messaging of feminism can contribute to that, but I think it's greater a component of capitalism than it ever really was about feminism. And it's a condition of society, and you can't really say that feminism is the reason for the rise of individualism, when it's a mindset that is being fed into by all facets of the media and popular culture, period. And they have absolutely nothing to do with feminism.
So so it sounds like to me you're saying that there really are no downsides to feminism as it pertains to.
No, I didn't say that. I said that because for one thing, I've always seen like you say, the mainstream feminism is a mechanism for the empowerment of white women. It was never really intended outside of, I mean, even the women's suffrage movement, that was, they were not really considering black women voting, because they figured, well, if women get the right to vote, that'll be white women, and that black women wouldn't be able to vote because they were black still. So that, I mean, I've never seen the inclusiveness of black women's particular struggles within mainstream feminism. Most of the strides and accomplishments that have been achieved by black women that were components of the civil rights movement in general and the individual efforts of black women themselves. I don't think that black women have been raised up by feminism. Black women have been raised up by themselves.
Doc Lutz?
And when you look at female black activists like Mary Bethune-Cookman, she never called herself a feminist. She calls herself a womanist. And there's a reason she made that distinction.
Well,
and when you look at some of the things, some of the so-called victories of the civil rights movement, they were eroded by feminism, because like affirmative action was put in place to deal with the discrepancy and the disparaging of discrimination of black people and minorities. But when it was put into place, the greatest beneficiaries were white women. Mm-hmm. And yes, you can say, well, women were discriminated against in the workplace, but it's not the same thing as, you can't have reparations for something when they were also the beneficiary of that discrimination by being in the household with a white man. So to give them the benefits of, I mean, same thing with minority business contracts. We put that in there because black contractors receive 3% to less than 1%, depending on the area, of all contracts in competitive bidding. So we created a class, the minority business. Enterprise bidding component, and they're supposed to seek out first minority contractors. Well, what they did, once again, white men put their wives in the company, they put their daughters in the company, and then they bidded under these minority contracts and won a great deal of them, more than black contractors did. So these things that were supposed to bring some resources into the black community also were used as a old switcheroo to erode those resources from ever making it to the black community in the name of feminism.
Amazing. Doc Locke, you were going to interject some things.
Well, there was an organization comprised of black women that showed up for the suffrage marches. It was their first act of community service. So I don't think we showed up for them. We showed up for us in 1913 on March 3rd. Okay. So that's what I just wanted to put that out there, to let people know that we might not have been like their first choice, but we were there fighting for our rights too, because we felt like we should be equal as well.
But then, if that's the case, because I'm listening to this and the history of it,
Mhm.
I'm experiencing a cognitive dissonance here. Because if we're truly a community, and I benefit, but you don't, then do I really benefit?
Zuri wanted to say something.
I mean, I just think about that question. Just think about the question as you're talking, because not that I'm against anybody benefiting, but if we're a community and it's man and woman, if one benefits, shouldn't the beneficiary, the benefactor, do what their due diligence to make sure that everyone benefits? So just kind of think about that. Zuri, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, when you guys was talking about the feminist movement and how it wasn't for the black women, it wasn't, because before then, like when like Black Wall Street, we were families. So black women didn't have to feel the need to, oh, I need to vote, I need to be taken care of. No, because the man was going out working and the woman was taking care of the home. So we didn't need that until, like I said, the white women came along and was like, hey, and added us into, and all of a sudden it was black women, hey, I want to be on my own. I want to do this. I want to be independent. Because before then, we never heard stuff like that before.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's true, and I don't have census data to support it. But every black woman in my family, educated or not, married or not, has worked. Um, and while there are a few um, elites that didn't work, I think the majority of black people from Black Wall Street onward have had two incomes.
I don't think it's always been a two income home. That's I don't like I said, I have to look that up, but I'm almost positive it hasn't always been. It wasn't a two income home. Most of the time, the men were going out working, and the women took care of the family and the children.
Well, there's another piece of history, and I'm glad we have Mojo here to kind of give the specifics on it. But we had the intersection of welfare,
I was going to say that as well. That
right, and that was a huge
component.
component. It pretty much obliterated the natural intention of family unity, because survival under the welfare
I
process dictated separation.
I agree, because I feel like welfare initially started for white people, but once black women started getting welfare, and they like, okay, you can get welfare, but you just got to kick the man out the house. So now women came with the mindset of, I don't need a man. Once we have children, or whatever, I don't need a man for you to take care of me or do whatever. I have the government's help. I
I
can
don't
keep
think
having
this
kids,
is,
and the government's going to help me out.
yeah, I don't think this is how it worked. If I'm not mistaken, when welfare was introduced, it was for white people, but at that time, they had the whole family was intact when welfare started. It's for those who were really poor. But when it came an equal process for us, they told us our husbands could not be in the home. So I don't think it was an uprising of women who were saying, get out, because now I got
I
food
think it was
stamps.
I think it was black women. I mean, white women, I don't know, but as far as pertaining to the black community, that has happened a lot, because now there's broken families. You feel like you can have a child and the government could take care of you. You don't need a man to take care of you, because the government will help you out. And concerning the black community, that's what happened. Because I feel like if a lot of women weren't on welfare, their mindsets would be totally different. If they didn't have aid from the government, their mindset would change, especially in who they have children with, because you already know that, hey, I'm not going to get any help from the government. We need to make this work out so we can raise this child together. But that's not happening anymore. They feel like they don't need the man in the house to help raise the child anymore. And then with the feminism that we're talking about, it has created an unbalance in the home. There's no balance in the home, even for the children, because you need feminine and masculine to raise children. So that way that they can have that balance. But that's not happening anymore.
Hey, Shade Tree Intellectual, glad to have you on, brother. Shade Tree's reached out saying, hey, everyone, he's a regular watcher.
Hey.
Mojo, what is the sunrise rule?
Well, it started out as part of the Southern strategy, and then it expanded into New York and Baltimore and Philadelphia after it was shown to be effective. And what it was is basically all Black people all these time were paying taxes the entire time, but we were not allowed to receive any public works, any public programs. We weren't allowed to receive the GI Bill. We weren't allowed to receive welfare. Then in the Southern strategy, that's when they implemented a policy, but it was unwritten policy, because there was nothing in the welfare code itself that said you couldn't be married. There might be a fee structure that you might not get as many benefits, but that was not ever a part of it. There's something that was implemented solely to Black families, and what it was is they had figured out that Black men's wages were so extremely low that the amount of money that one could get from welfare would be more than the average Black man would make working a 60-hour week. So they positioned it as, having the man in the house was detrimental. You can do better without him, because we'll give you more money if you get the Black man out. And it wasn't just husbands. When they did sunshine raids, they come 5 o'clock in the morning, and if they found an adult male in the house that wasn't your son, I'm not sure they might have even kicked you off if you had an adult male child in there. But then they would take you off of welfare. And then there was stories of brothers would be they would time it, and they have lookouts, and they would let everybody know, well, hey, the welfare worker gonna be coming. And then brothers be jumping out the window of their own home, 6 o'clock in the morning, so their families can get those benefits from them. But oddly, for those who work there, we've dealt with a lot of adversity and have tried to turn it around to our favor. The thing about that is that actually worked for some families, because that Black male was hiding income. So he probably wasn't paying any taxes, and it was given, and so they were getting all of that money and the welfare money, instead of it just depends on how they responded to these tactics that were clearly racist, and they were targeted at separation of the Black family, because they were not applied to white people at all, and they were applied to very few Hispanics and no Asians.
So as it pertains to feminism, because again, that was one of the concerns mentioned in the monologue, that it misdirected people away from the unique attack on the African male.
Well, and that's actually in the messaging, and you have to realize any activism group is going to be infiltrated. Every single one, no matter what the group is. And then the feminist movement is easy to infiltrate, because white women were allies of white supremacy. And then you had some that were just flat out on their own races, like Ayn Rand. Yeah, you had people that were purely racist, purely Aryans. So that their messaging towards black women, black men, and black families was always targeted at separation. So if they said anything that didn't just on the surface have vitriol in it, it was subliminal.
Are you saying, Mojo, that the white female feminist movement exploited the African woman?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without any doubt. I mean, and you don't have to take my word for it. As a black man, there were many white feminists that were allies of the black community that was their problem with the feminist movement. That they specifically cited that it was intrinsically only for white people, and it was intrinsically, targeted to not be of any benefit to the black community whatsoever. That's why you have all of these splits in the leadership. In the leadership of them, and they got rid of the ones. I mean, Susan B. Anthony was overall a civil rights activist, and she had been an abolitionist. They absolutely wanted to completely remove her from even being taught as a feminist because of her inclusiveness. It was never meant to be inclusive.
Ladies, what say you? How does that stand with you? Mojo's assertion that the feminist movement really exploited the African women for their own agendas.
I agree. Because like you said, that they were racist, and everybody knows, I mean, I wouldn't say everybody, but at least back then during slavery or when everything, that white women were jealous of black women. So I agree. They used them for their own agenda because they didn't like black women at all. Their men wanted black women, and the white women wanted the black men, and the white women were sleeping with the black men, and the white man didn't even like that at all. And the white man the whole time was sleeping with the black women. And the white man's wife didn't like that he was still married to her, but sleeping with the black woman. So I agree with them when they used it for their own exploitation, to exploit them, which they did. And they had them jump on the bandwagon, which hasn't had any positivity on the black community at all.
Well, I mean, one of the visible things is you can go back through, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. You will always see black women participating with the feminist movement, with the Equal Rights Amendment. But when it came time to that black women being victimized, these groups are nowhere to be found. I mean, even to this day, I can't remember the lady's name, but there's a Hispanic activist in Texas. She's 72 years old right now, and she's trying to get her case heard by the Supreme Court. It
paused.
That was, very pro-police, even though they were trying to, reform the police. So just by her calling for this person that was appointed, their removal from that position, the Texas police arrested her and threw her in jail for her activism at 70 years old. Now at 72 years old. Now, and when this happened, where was National Organization of Women? Where were these women's groups when it was this Hispanic women? When the white cop was accused of raping multiple black women with like 13 women, right. Where was the outrage from the white feminist? Whenever a black woman is the victim of something, they are conspicuously absent. But but let it be a white woman, and you'll see Gloria Aldrich on the next morning ranting and raving on the television.
That's true.
It's more about money, though. If the black woman, if Ebony Case Williams got assaulted or whatever happened, Gloria will be right there beside her because.
Well, I mean, she's an opportunist, but she claims to be
Right.
be a feminist. But I mean, my point is still, I haven't seen them advocate. I mean, they quite possibly have, and one of the frustrating things about it is that group was completely powerless, toothless, and it was a paper dragon until Anita Hill. And that's what brought them into visibility with the Rainbow Coalition and the then National Organization of Women. That's how they got to have the hearings on Clarence Thomas's hearing. And so they brought out all of these things, and these things were also used to to amend the workplace laws and the sexual harassment and hostile work environment. And Anita Hill was a figurehead, and they used her to raise up their organization. But what then after that, what did they do for Black women?
Nothing. Because I feel like what you were saying, that like the more the white women get crazy, I feel like the Black women feed off that energy. They get even like crazier, and we're just feeding off the energy, and it's not doing well for us as a community, for our families. You can look at society today and look how it's going.
I mean, they're disingenuous because they had the million whatever, the pink hat march, and then right after that, they voted in larger numbers for Donald Trump. They voted in larger numbers than white men did. Knowing this man's a racist, knowing this man's a misogynist, knowing this man's a sexual predator, all these millions of women were sitting there marching and yelling, and they turned around and voted for him. And they do it every time.
Just had an idea, a concept here based on what everyone's saying here. So I'm going to pose this question to you, Doc Locks. What would an African-American female's feminist movement today look like, and what would be its objectives and goals?
I think it's already out there, and they have created their objectives and goals. Mojo talked about womanist theory. The last time I looked at it, which was about 7 years ago, the womanists believe that men could be a part of this ideology because they, Black men or marginalized men, because they are often treated the way we are. Like we get the same treatment, it just looks different, right? I would hope the agenda would be inclusive and would maintain leadership that looked like us and that was for us. And I say that because a lot of the times when we get things, we are eager, far too eager to let the person or the system that destroyed us or continues to destroy us in because they're cool or we welcome them to the cookout. So I would hope that if somebody were doing this or redoing it in its infancy, we made it solid enough where Black men and women felt safe to come in and talk about the pervasive issues, and then create a platform to deal with those issues. Like I work in education. So every time we talk about first generation students or people who have never been to college, we always think about the barriers that they face. So if we're going to restart this movement or revamp it, we need to think about our barriers and then create viable solutions for that.
You said that you believe that movement already exists. Are there names associated with this movement?
None
what are the names of some of the organizations?
Well, it's not like an organization. It's just they're womanist. I can see her face, and I have a picture of her in my closet. Angela Davis is more womanist than she is feminist. Okay. But there's a group of people who wholly subscribe to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't Angela Davis that came out like a few years ago that she was married to a white woman?
Mhm.
So I'm like,
So was Frederick Douglass.
Right.
yeah. So,
So was Sidney Poitier. I mean, a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that detracts from who they are or what they
Not,
are.
not that it should, but it does.
yeah.
It's inevitable. The reality is this: when you frame things in black and white, there are belief systems that are associated with that. And just because two people decide to commingle of different racial groups does not eradicate those racial stereotypical beliefs. So
And maybe,
it may
oh,
be it may be utopic to think that okay, they're together, so those barriers have been broken. That actually multiracial relationships don't do anything to break down racial barriers.
I would agree.
somebody just sent me something that said that Alice Walker coined the phrase, coined, and made it more viable and to our culture. So I would assume that she would be a womanist in this as well. But when I was studying this, again, this was a long time ago, the womanist was very inclusive, but also very intentional about who could get in because everybody can't be a part of this. It needs to, be people who are well intentioned.
Mhm. Well, I think it's an important question. Um, this has been a great discussion. I think we laid the foundation for future discussions. Um, but there's a couple of concerns that I'm having uh, in what this discussion has unveiled for me, and I'm still struggling with it. I haven't been able to find the right words, but I'm not appreciating this historically documented exploitation,
I would agree.
and that we are somehow walled uh, things are better for a certain portion of our community versus the other. And we seem to be okay with it or oblivious to it. I'm not really sure. But we should really know from historical uh, repetitive patterns that any type of intervention from the racially white demographic on behalf or toward the racially black demographic generally is not intended for our best interests.
Right.
I think we all agree to that.
But our current behavior does not exemplify that.
I don't think we could put it in an all or none bucket.
It's not all or none, but statistically, it supports what I'm saying. Our collective behavior, the erosion of the traditional family structure, that's huge.
It's gone.
That's huge, and yet we behave as if we have achieved something, and I'm not sure we have. If you look at the data, our trajectory collectively, not just one particular pocket of the community that may be on this face moving upward, but as a collective community, our trajectory is downward. And
Most
we don't
definitely.
really seem to be in touch with that.
Right.
That concerns me.
It concerns me as well because it's major, and like I said, it's affecting us big time. And like you said, we're walking around oblivious to it. Like it's not affecting us. It's not affecting the children. It's having an effect on everybody, especially our children. And then we wonder why the way things are going the way that they are today are because, like I said, there's no family structure. There's no man in the house. Like I say, men create discipline and structure in the house. And like one of the things that I know is like says it takes that I always say it takes a masculine and feminine role to raise children, not the mother trying to be the man and the woman at the same time, because it almost does create chaos. There's no balance in the house.
What's the point of the feminist movement achieving its independence if it's not independent enough to maintain its own family structure?
I think if it did work, then at a certain age, women wouldn't be like, hey, by the time some of them hit 40s, 50s, if you watch a lot of stuff, they regret not having a man, not being married, taking their career first. A lot of women regret that. And then by that age, it's like, it's too late, because a lot of them, like Doc Locke said, they're taught by their grandmas and mothers to be independent. And a lot of times we're the only race that's taught to be independent. A lot of other races are taught once you, like in your 20s, you're supposed to be looking for a husband, trying to create a family. But Black women are taught that, hey, go out and have this lifestyle. Or a lot of even all women in general now think that in their 20s, they're supposed to be in a whole phase instead of trying to find the man to raise your children with. And then after you've had these children by different men, it's a problem. So it has created the whole situation to me is chaotic.
So here's what I want to do. We're going to close this out, but we're going to do a lightning round on the way out, starting with Zuri. And we're going to answer this question: has feminism been a net positive for the Black community? So the question to each one of you as we close is, has feminism been a net positive or a net negative? And give me 3, as best you can, examples of why you believe it to be either or, beginning with Zuri.
Go first. So now I got to think it off the top of my head.
I was going to say, that's not a lightning round. That's
yeah. I'm trying to go
think about that.
Yeah, quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a very negative influence on our community. We can look at how our family structure is, how the independent women, and how we feel like we don't need a man. And I can't really come up with a third one because I kind of need some time. But
okay.
There's just no balance in our community at all. There's no balance in our homes. There's no balance in our communities. We're forgetting the part where the men lead and they create structure and discipline, and we're trying to do it on our own. And then, or as they say, we can't be in our soft era, whatever that means. But, and like they say, if you're more feminine, you attract a male protector. You don't attract those other men that are the 5% that everybody's sleeping with. You attract natural protectors, people that want to protect you. If you already are in your feminine, you will attract that masculine man towards you, and that will complete the balance. So that way the children can have the nurturing, which men nurture as well, but then they have the protection, the direction, the discipline, the structure. Without that.
And Dr. Van Zandt said that's how you can tell a woman who is operating in her power of femininity, is she attracts, that she can start from nothing and attract the very things that she needs, just based on her feminine essence. But I know I'm kind of doing a brief explanation.
Like that energy, men can feel that energy already when a woman is already moving in her femininity. They can read that energy, they can feel it. It's no question about it.
Yeah. Doc Locke, has feminism been a net positive or net negative for the Black community? And examples.
I think it's hard to tell, but overall, I think it has more positives than negatives when applied correctly. I can vote. I can have my own house, mortgage, everything that I want. If I'm in a situation that I need to get out of, I can. I no longer have to have a husband to give me permission to get my tubes tied because I don't want any more children. So it gives me a certain level of autonomy on things without being vicious or vindictive or the stereotypical things that come to mind when we think about femininity or feminism.
Yeah.
And here's what I want to point out. And I love Iyanla Van Zant, but she was a single mother, okay? And she's been married, but she is not married. So I think sometimes we have to look at the messenger as well, because everybody wants to talk about Steve Harvey being a relationship consultant, and he's been married like 3 times and cheated on all of the wives, and they want to talk about that. So let's also talk about a person who has operated primarily in masculine energy most of her adult life, who is now trying to tell people, women, that they need to be more feminine. And is she, because she has the platform, is she using her platform for that?
Great observation. I would encourage everyone to go and check her interview out, because she is very open about that process of her life, and you all make your mind up for yourself. That is, a great observation. Dr. Mojo, has feminism been a net positive or net negative for the Black community, and your rationale?
It's been cumulatively negative because, reiterate the things I already said. First off, things like siphoning resources that were meant for the Black community and meant to deal with discrepancies of discrimination, then were siphoned off by white females, affirmative action, minority business. Secondly, then there is the messaging. That it's interesting that when you first start to hear this message of independence, it was insincere, because white women said that, but they didn't say it for themselves. They still maintained an ideal of the nuclear family for themselves. And that message was really meant for women of color, and it was insincere, but the white women knew they were lying, because all you had to do was watch what they did. The theory they espoused and the theory they practiced were 2 entirely different things. And that message they stopped even saying it amongst their community because they didn't want their young women to pick up on it. You will seldom ever hear white women say that anymore, but they started that. Then they dropped it once women of color picked it up. Like they planted that seed. And I think that was intentionally nefarious. And then thirdly, like I said before, I don't attribute the accomplishments of Black women to white feminists. I attribute them to Black women. And with or without white women and white women organizations, Black women have been fighting the good fight for a long time. And a lot of people don't realize this, that we hear about Martin Luther King, but his mother was one of the very first activists in 1900. And we seldom even hear about her. So, I mean, Black women have been fighting on their own and fighting alongside Black men for their rights anyway, regardless of what any white women did. So I don't attribute that to feminism.
Okay. So we've set up ourselves for a second discussion series on this. And I want to explore further the dynamic of a contemporary version of culturally relevant feminism, if that really were to exist today. If it does, and if it does not, if it were to exist, what would be the issues that today's culturally relevant feminism what would be the platform, its platform? As far as me answering that question, I don't, if you can't calculate the positive as a Black community, so far feminism, for what we've read, it has, even for the things that it has done in a positive light, it hasn't really affected the collective community, just a particular sect of the community. And so I would say, just for that reason alone, that is, it was not designed to be a holistic community tool. And I'll leave that out there for debate for the next show. Zuri, Doc Locks, Mojo, you all have been great. May not have been a barn burning discussion, but I love good, critical, deep thinking a process. So have a great week. And until the next time we meet, we'll see you in the black space.